Once again, good evening. I am Rajlakshmi and I would be the host for today. On behalf of Pune International Center, it is my pleasure to warmly welcome all of you for this special evening celebration of the launch of a book on Through a Diplomat's Lens, Capturing Momentous Times. A book that very well narrates the diplomatic endeavors of our author. Today, we gather not just to unveil a book, but to reflect on decades of diplomacy, history, and the lived experiences of a distinguished diplomat who has represented India across continents. We are honored by the presence of our distinguished panelists, speakers, members, and our dear audience. Thank you all for joining us today. To set the tone for today's discussion, we will begin with a short video on the work of geopolitics and geoeconomics at the Pune International Center, featuring insights from Ambassador Gautam Bambawale, convener of Asia Economic Dialogue. May I request my technical team to please relay the video.
The Pune International Center also works in the area of geopolitics and geoeconomics, and we do a lot of work in this area. We have had conferences, seminars, discussions, scrums, and other such events. And we also do a lot of publications. We have done issue briefs, we have done policy papers in the area of geopolitics and economics. One of the main events that we do in this area is, of course, the annual Asia Economic Dialogue, which is an international geoeconomics conference which is held here in Pune. Over the last 6 years, we have been doing this. It's held at the last weekend of February every year. So in February 2026 also, from 26th to 28th, we will be hosting this conference. It's an international conference. And for the first time ever, it will be held here on the campus of the Pune International Center. So this is a new beginning for us as far as this conference is concerned. We have also written, researched, and published a book on China, which was way back in 2022, when we wrote a book called Rising to the China Challenge, and we want to continue publishing books of this kind. So that's some of the research and events that we do here at the Pune International Center in the area of geopolitics and geoeconomics.
Thank you, team. And now to start with the proceedings of the day, I would like to invite Dr. Raghunath Mashelkar, President of Pune International Center, to address this gathering.
Our most beloved Vice President, Dr. Vijay Kelkar, my very dear friend, Ambassador Sudhir Devare, Saubhagyavati Hematai Devare, distinguished panelists whom you will see shortly, and dear members of my PIC family. I'm sorry that we had to postpone this event of launch of this particular book by Ambassador Sudhir Devare because of the sad demise under very shocking circumstances of Ajit Dada Pawar. We owe a lot to him. In fact, in a public speech yesterday in Pune University, I acknowledged his contribution, something that was pending for almost 10 years, which was the gift of the land for building this campus. Ajit Dada Pawar cleared it within no time. So we will remain ever so obliged to him. So I want to begin by paying our respects to revered Ajit Dada. I must also thank Sudhir and Hematai for visiting our home, having a cup of tea, but at the same time gifting this book, Capturing Momentous Times Through a Diplomatic Lens, to me. So I have had the unfair advantage of having read the full book before many of you, and I'm very proud of that. To me, Sudhir, your memoir is not merely a memoir. According to me, it is a front row seat in history, if I may put it this way. I found that it is the story of nearly 4 decades of international change, seen not from a distance, but from the inside, from rooms where decisions were taken, from streets where regimes changed, and from societies where people dared to hope for freedom and dignity. From the Soviet Union to Sikkim, from South Korea to Germany, from Ukraine to Indonesia, the book carries us across geographies, as you will soon discover during the conversations, and across eras. I found that it takes us to the Cold War and its aftermath, to the fall of old orders, and the uncertain birth of new ones. And it reminds us that history is not only made by abstract forces, but by human courage, human fear, and human aspiration. What makes this book, according to me, particularly valuable is that Ambassador Devare was not just an observer, he was a witness and a participant. He saw the fall of authoritarian regimes, the reunification of Germany, and he served as India's first ambassador to newly independent nations after the collapse of Soviet Union. These are not footnotes in history. These are turning points that continue to shape the world we live in today. And woven through all this is another quiet but powerful story, India's journey as a non-aligned nation, as a developing country, and as a confident, responsible actor navigating turbulent global waters with prudence and with principles. This is why it is so fitting that this conversation is joined by Dr. Vijay Kelkar, one of India's most eminent economists and a thinker. We have spent a lifetime understanding how nations build strength, resilience, and credibility over time. Diplomacy and economics are, after all, two sides of the same coin. One shapes the space a nation occupies in the world, and the other shapes the strength with which it stands there, firmly, resiliently. We meet today at a time when the world is once again restless and uncertain, when old assumptions are breaking, new alignments are forming, and history seems to be accelerating. In such times, books like this do something precious. They give us perspective, they remind us where today's crises come from, and how yesterday's transitions were navigated, and what kind of leadership and judgment the future will demand. So this evening is not just about looking back, it is about learning how to look ahead with clarity, with humility, and with confidence. Ambassador Devare, Dr. Kelkar, we are privileged to listen to you both and also the panelists. Let us begin this fireside chat not just as a discussion of a book, but as a reflection on the making of our new world and India's new role in it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that insights and reflections. Now we would move forward to the official launch of the book, for which I would like to invite Dr. Vijay Kelkar, Ambassador Sudhir Devare, Ambassador Ramesh Mulye, Dr. Shrikant Paranjpe, Shriram Pawar, Professor Vinay Hardikar, and Mr. Dinanath Kholkar. The most anticipated moment of this evening, the official launch of Through a Diplomat's Lens, Capturing Momentous Times. Thank you so much, everyone. I would request Dr. Kelkar and all our panelists to be seated on the stage. To introduce us to the journey behind this book, its stories, its reflections, and the defining moments, it is my privilege to introduce the author himself, Ambassador retired Sudhir Devare, a former Indian diplomat with an illustrious career. He was the first Indian ambassador to Ukraine, Georgia, and Armenia. He established the Indian embassies in these countries in 1992 following the disintegration of Soviet Union. He was also the ambassador to South Korea and Indonesia. As Secretary of the Ministry of External Affairs, he played a pivotal role in shaping and implementing India's Look East policy, and also served as a member of the National Security Advisory Board. Ambassador Devare served as the chairman of the Research and Information Systems for Developing Countries, RIS, and now he currently serves as the chairman of the Research Advisory Council of RIS and the Society for the Indian Ocean Studies. Sir, I would like to invite you on the stage for your address.
Good afternoon. Dr. Mashelkar, Dr. Kelkar, members of the PIC, staff of PIC, eminent panelists on the dais, friends old and new, observers of the world scene, students. I would also like to acknowledge in the audience the presence of Mr. Vasant Joshi, a leading economist and a banker, my friend and guru, and today it is his 94th birthday. First of all, let me say, Dr. Mashelkar has spoken everything about the book so brilliantly. I don't have really words to fully appreciate that, sir. I think you have touched upon the finest points, what I had in mind, and I really compliment you for that wonderful analysis. How soon you have done that, only in 3-4 days' time before I met you and gave the book. Thank you very much, sir. Well, nothing like having a program like this in your hometown. I've had such occasions in many places, Delhi, elsewhere, but I think coming to Pune and to meet old friends and to speak about whatever small correction, humble effort that I've done in presence of my old colleagues and friends, I think there is no parallel experience as it is now. I'm indeed grateful to PIC, an intellectual hub in Pune, which has been created, nurtured by the tireless efforts of Dr. Mashelkar, Dr. Vijay Kelkar, many of you over the last 10-15 years. And today it has now emerged as a leading center for geoeconomics, geopolitics, social innovation. I think your agenda is so much. Every day I get some kind of a notification on my email, and I don't know how PIC is really coping with all this. I'm also grateful to 4 very eminent panelists here. They agreed to my request, went through the book, I think, in such a short time that I have given the books to them, and have come here today. Ambassador Ramesh Mulye is my old friend and colleague. Dr. Shrikant Paranjpe is the eminent professor for Defense and Strategic Studies from Pune University. Mr. Shriram Pawar is a leading light of Sakal for years, and I've been reading his column with deep interest. He's the chief editor of Sakal Group. And Shri Vinay Hardikar is a political thinker, social activist, music expert, and I can't go on describing his several qualities. So I'm really thankful to all of them to have accepted this invitation and come here to share their thoughts about the book. Well, ladies and gentlemen, my book is actually not a personalized record of what I was up to in the diplomatic service for 35, 40 years. It is more of an account of my professional journey as a public servant, dealing with issues of geopolitics, geoeconomics. It had a lot of incidents, a lot of anecdotes, a lot of conversations with eminent people around the world. That was a great opportunity that I had. And I think all that has been somehow put in the book. So I would say this book of mine is diplomatic, at the same time not so diplomatic, because I have also touched upon various areas like the human aspirations to which Dr. Mashelkar just now mentioned. I think they are rather unusual for a diplomat, which I somehow ventured to deal with and somehow came unscathed after that. So, well, diplomat's life, well, everybody in the world, all of us have our own perspective about our life. So do diplomats. But there's a difference because we are all required to travel from one country to the other, one post to the other, difficult or easy, hard or soft. And all along we have that mantra in our mind that is nurturing, preserving, promoting national interest. Now, what that national interest is, very often is left to us. The interpretation of national interest, redefining of a national interest as per the circumstances is the responsibility of the diplomat. And therefore, a diplomat is required to go on analyzing, finding new ideas and so on. There is another weakness among diplomats, and that weakness is prefixing the words like when I was there, meaning any major development which takes place elsewhere in any part of the world, we try to associate ourselves with that, or trying to tell the world that, look, I was also somehow a spectator or a witness or participant in that. And I am no exception either. Well, there were 5 instances in my diplomatic life, which I can easily count, where epoch-making things happened. Very tumultuous developments took place. And these developments, of course, were not really of my making. They were, in fact, great coincidence that I happened to be there. But they were of such nature that they changed the regional or even global scene. Such were the implications of those developments. In Sikkim, there was a ruler, Chogyal, who started acting very arbitrarily, not paying enough attention to the welfare of the common people, who protested, who rose in revolt against him. And Chogyal's position was, he was removed from his position, and within a year's time, Sikkim was integrated. Sikkim became part of India. In South Korea, there was a military regime, autocratic regime, which did not hesitate to use violence against people. Lots of students were massacred. And this was happening at a time when Korea was progressing economically at a dizzying pace. It had something like 12-13% of GDP growth at that time. But the students and the common people of South Korea just couldn't take it anymore. They strongly protested, came out in streets in large numbers. Demonstrations went on for a month. Even earlier also it was going on. And finally, the regime had to go. The Korean President Chun Doo-han had to resign and hand over power to a democratically elected government. In Germany, the infamous Berlin Wall was breached, and within a year's time, West and East Germany were reunited. In Ukraine, Armenia, and Georgia, which really followed the disintegration of the mighty Soviet Union, the collapse of the powerful Communist Party of the Soviet Union, and the emergence of 16 republics, these republics, Ukraine and others, were that time were really suffering from privation, discrimination, and lot of shortcomings. And finally, in Indonesia, where 32-year-old reign of President Suharto also came to an end, following again massive demonstrations by the common people against the crony capitalists and very arbitrary kind of regime of President Suharto. I mentioned all these because it so happened that I was present at all these 5 locations when they happened. And I was willy-nilly, it was my privilege to be there, a first-hand witness to these regime changes, the transitions of governments this took place. Authoritarianism giving way to democratic governance. And for a diplomat from India, the largest democracy, vibrant representational government in India, I think I felt inspired. It was an amazing experience for a diplomat. I thought I should pen some of these experiences, my reflections, and hence this book. Much of my time was spent, diplomatic time was spent in Cold War. And I saw, of course, the implications of that. There were a lot of military regimes. In fact, barring 2-3 postings of mine, rest were all in autocratic regime governments. So I saw all that. And yet, I also saw the values of human rights, values of freedom, openness. All these were coming to the surface. And people were showing that, were exhibiting that with courage, without fear. That was something, that exhibition of human aspirations really impressed me a great deal. I think more than anything else. Mahatma Gandhi's message of non-violence and satyagraha, you will be surprised, resonated strongly at the highest levels of political leadership in South Korea and Indonesia. I think these were amazing experiences. And of course, as Dr. Saab just now mentioned, we were navigating our policies through these turbulent years, through this very turmoil kind of regimes, in a very calm, conventional manner maybe, following our policy of non-alignment. We call it now strategic autonomy. Friendship with countries, with close neighbors as well as outside powers who had suffered like us through colonialism and so on, and trying to remain kind of a balanced position across the world. I have spoken about these things. This is not, my career was not just a history, a book is not just a history statement of all these developments. I find there's a contemporary relevance to what I have written in today's situation as well. Because there are unfolding, evolving developments still taking place in many parts. Some of the countries which I have described in detail, like Myanmar, formerly Burma, South Korea also in some ways, the current democratic upsurge in South Korea following what the last president did of declaring martial law. Ukraine, of course. Ukraine-Russia situation continues to be so bad. And in my book, I've talked about the identity and problems and, so that was there. And Southeast Asia. Indonesia is going through, again, socio-cultural transformation, turmoil. In Thailand and Cambodia, there is open warfare going on. So Southeast Asia is also not fully settled as such. So these are some of the issues which bring the present discussions in line with what I have said in my book. I think that contemporary relevance also you will find it. Well, I think I have spoken enough. I'll stop here. More when you read the book. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for comprehensively giving us an overview of your book. Moving forward, we will now have an engaging panel discussion which will explore the ideas, experiences, and the contemporary relevance of this book. Dr. Vijay Kelkar, Vice President of Pune International Center, will be the chairperson for today's panel discussion. I would also like to formally introduce all our panelists, starting with Ambassador Sudhir Devare, author of Through a Diplomat's Lens. Ambassador Ramesh Mulye, a former Indian diplomat who has also served as the Indian ambassador to Philippines and Syria, and also as the strategic advisor to CII. Professor Shrikant Paranjpe, former head of Department of Defense and Strategic Studies, Savitribai Phule Pune University. Professor Paranjpe does research in international security, arms control, conflict processes, and foreign policy. He was also the research fellow at the Center for Military Studies, Stellenbosch University of South Africa, and has held many such positions. Shriram Pawar was the chief editor of Sakal Media Group, where he led the organization's content strategy. With over 25 years in journalism, he has reported extensively on national politics and international affairs, launched several important print and digital initiatives, and is well-known columnist and television commentator. His work also integrates research-driven journalism with impactful social and civic campaigns across Maharashtra. Professor Vinay Hardikar is a noted socio-political thinker, writer, and a public intellectual with over 4 decades of experience as a teacher, journalist, activist, and editor. An author of several books and a regular commentator on current affairs and ideology, he is widely respected in Maharashtra's intellectual circles for his sharp analysis and commitment to democratic values. He also serves as a faculty member at Flame University, Pune. May I request all our panelists to move ahead with the panel discussion, and I give the mic to Dr. Kelkar. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Mashelkar, who is a guru to all of us all, our author whom we are come to listen today and talk about it is Ambassador Devare, and all other panelist members, friends. As was mentioned, I think we'll first request Ambassador Mulye to start the discussion, and then we'll follow with other. Ambassador Mulye.
Good evening, Dr. Mashelkar, Vijay, Kelkar, my fellow panelists, and of course Sudhir, Ambassador Devare. It's my privilege to be here because Sudhir and I go back for a very long time. We're colleagues in the diplomatic service, and in addition to that, we also happen to be good friends. So it's been a pleasure and a privilege to be here on an auspicious occasion like the publication of his book. There are several, Sudhir has gone in depth about what diplomacy consists of and what many people's perceptions about it are in his book. I'd just like to say that there are several more flippant definitions available about diplomacy. For instance, there is one which is very well known, is that the diplomat who lies abroad for his country. Now, lies, you can have double meaning for that. And then there is also the other one, which says that diplomacy is a good mix. It's 50% alcohol and 50% protocol. There are a lot of people who think it's exactly the opposite. It's not the same. Anyway, to talk about Sudhir's book and what it sets out, I think it's a bit necessary and even relevant to speak about the current situation in the world, the geopolitical situation, to situate it where we can profitably talk more about it. Everybody knows what's going on. I mean, we are in a state of flux in the world at the moment. Mr. Trump, before we come to Mr. Trump, there was the George Bush, at the end of the first Iraq war, started by saying that there is now a new international order, and that is in tatters. Then there was Francis Fukuyama, who also proclaimed after the fall of the Soviet Union that history is at an end. We don't need to go any further because Western liberal values have triumphed over everything and communism is dead. We know what's been happening since then. And then, as Henry Kissinger put, came the great disruptor, Donald Trump, to come to power. America, after its kind of unipolar world for a while, during which the Soviet Union was in decline and China was not yet risen, found itself slowly being not overtaken, but at least being measured up to by other powers. And the grand definition of a disruptor in the world is that they are necessary, but only to the extent that they can change the established order. The shortcoming is basically that they do not have anything to propose in its place. They know what is perhaps decaying, perhaps needs change, and they took a very drastic hammer to bring it down, but they don't have anything to propose in its place. And the classic example is Donald Trump. We have seen what has been going on. The international order, as we know, is completely in chaos. The United Nations counts for nothing. The rules-based trade order, etc., is also gone, with WTO totally paralyzed. And there's politics everywhere. US is withdrawing for many other things. The old allies are bickering among themselves. The Europeans, who were supposed to be the great allies of the United States, are totally bewildered by the actions that Donald Trump has taken and on his attitude towards Greenland as well as towards Canada, which is not only his neighbor, both these countries being part of the NATO alliance. So you have the unthinkable thought of American troops being sent to Greenland on the allies' territory to bring it forcibly into the American orbit. Anyway, all this is going on, and there is also the other churn of the history has been after the invasion by the Soviet Union of Ukraine. Again, there is a lot of change in Europe. Traditionally neutral countries like Sweden and Finland have now decided to join alliances. So in a certain sense, what prompted, or at least what was given as official thought for the Russian move into Ukraine, that the security is in fact jeopardized much more, and the militarization and polarization of the world is becoming complete. I said all this simply because it is in this context that we need to read Ambassador Devare's book, because it's not only a compendium of historical events where he had the privilege to serve over a period of many years, and where he served with great distinction, but it also combines, although he denies it, a bit of a memoir. It's not totally a memoir, but his personal reflections are extremely important and valuable. For instance, he starts by saying that he took his personal values and his ideas about liberal democracy to wherever he went, in addition to serving the government interest. I mean, any diplomat has to serve the country's interest. As he said, they are defined depending upon the place where he is and the circumstances. What was valid in one country at one time is not necessarily so after 5 years. Things change. I mean, witness Bangladesh, for example, or witness our relationship with several other of our neighbors. Things change. I mean, the regimes change, people change. But you have to be constant. And Sudhir brought this, what shall I say, the steadiness that is totally required by a diplomat to do and observe. He was not only an observer, he was a very acute observer, but at the same time he was also a player. He brought the sense of, he contacted not only with the governments and so on. If you read the book, you will find that he managed, along with the great help of a charming and talented spouse, Hema, to cultivate a large section of people who were not necessarily policymakers. Policymakers he had to deal with, but there were other people, the leaders of opposition, the thinkers, the journalists, and including the common people. I mean, this is something going beyond the call of duty, because many run-of-the-mill diplomats think that if they've done the business with the government, and then their job is done. But he went well beyond that and brought his empathy, his value and in these exchanges, and left lasting impressions in the countries in which he served. So this compendium of history that he has made now, infused with his personal observations and great insights, will serve as a great excuse me, it is valuable source of information to historians as well as students, contemporary students of history, because he doesn't stop talking about the places which he had the privilege to serve when he stopped working there. He brings it right up to date till the date of the publication of what's going on. So it gives a very, very interesting perspective about how things keep on changing, and how, although they look the same, they never are the same. So that is something I find is extremely useful for anybody who wants to pursue geopolitical things in the current setup. Then what I really liked also was that apart from his observations about the regimes in different countries like South Korea, Indonesia, and others, which he describes in great detail and in a very interesting manner, he also has laced his book with very interesting anecdotes, which are really quite charming. I mean, some of them are really interesting, and I would like to quote some of them. He mentions when he was in Moscow, for example, there was Mrs. Indira Gandhi's visit there. She was Prime Minister at the time. And she came, Kosygin, the then Prime Minister of Soviet Union, was supposed to see her off at the airport. And Mrs. Gandhi was delayed because of a press conference or something. But Kosygin had already arrived at the airport and was waiting there. At the same time, there are lots of Indian children, embassy staff and others, Indians staying there, who had gone to say goodbye to Mrs. Gandhi. And Kosygin, normally the very dour-looking personality, played Uncle Kosygin to them by telling them stories. And the kids were very happily playing with him. And even when Mrs. Gandhi came to the airport, apparently the story continued. So that is one of the things that is quite interesting. Then he talks about his flight to Armenia, where he had, as co-passengers, flying chicken. And I could well believe such stories, because I had a similar experience of flying to Nigeria, flying chicken in the aircraft. Then there is the story, the Ukraine, when the three princes and one princess from India went, and their statue at the river Dept. That is another interesting anecdote about it, as well as this going to Georgia, and where there was a man in a loincloth from ancient times of India. So describing really the ancient ties of our country, which are little known, because we know most of our people in the recent times have known about Soviet Union only through the USSR time. They were not really aware about our deep cultural ties with in some of these so-called republics like Georgia, Ukraine, etc., etc. We knew about Indonesia, we knew about South Korea, etc., but these are Asian countries. Even about Indonesia, to give an example of Sudhir's long reach across the political spectrum and to make friends, is his friendship with Sukarno. Sukarno was the founding president of Indonesia. His daughter, Megawati Suparnaputri, later on became president. But before that, she was leader of opposition when Sudhir and Hema were posted there. And they were such friends. They developed such a friendship with her that she used to drop in unexpectedly without announcing to their houses. But this is quite unheard of, that normally the politicians, particularly in Southeast Asian countries, are very reserved in certain sense. They take their jobs very seriously. So somebody who could manage to do these kinds of things across must be given his more than due credit for establishing this kind of a relationship with people on different walks of life. So I think the acute observations and insights that Sudhir's book is full of will be very useful to people who are going to do research about these countries, because it gives them a complete background against which to, also kind of resource material. One little regret I have, Sudhir, though, about the book, that I think I wish you had shed your diplomatic reserve a little bit and talked about the policy failures that we had on our part, or the policy lacunae at some time appear. I mean, you talk about, for example, ASEAN, and how they looked at us because they thought that we were the Soviet Union and so on, and they were on the other camp, particularly in Kampuchea. That's all true. But we must also not forget that in the early days, early heady days of our own non-alignment, we treated these countries like they were little brothers. I mean, they were not very important. I mean, I remember people used to laugh at South Korea as a kind of American lackey. And look where they went, finally. So I think that was one of the things. Second thing that I must say is also about some of our neighboring countries. I mean, you held this important position of Bangladesh, Joint Secretary dealing with Bangladesh and other places. And it could have been, for instance, instructive to know what soured in our relationship with Bangladesh, a country which we helped create. And similarly about Sukarno. I mean, Sukarno was somebody who we really helped establish against the Dutch. Your story about the Biju Patnaik and flying the Prime Minister out of the Dutch prison and so on. And there was a lot of goodwill in the initial stages. But the same Sukarno eventually turned very much against India, became very bitter about it. And I think these are some of the things which not only the policymakers, but students of history and diplomacy need to ponder about. I think there are many other things I could keep on going with, but I'm sure that you want to hear other speakers, so I'll leave you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. May I request Professor Paranjpe? And I would request all panelists to 10 minutes remarks.
Dr. Mashelkar, Dr. Vijay, Kelkar, my fellow panelists and friends. Let me thank the Pune International Center for inviting me here to share some of my ideas and views about this book. Many years ago, the Ministry of External Affairs had organized a conference in Delhi of scholars and researchers who were working in international relations, strategic studies, security studies. I think Ambassador Bombale was one of the organizers in that conference. The purpose was to get perceptions from scholars from outside of Delhi and not be Delhi-centric. That was one of the first things which I remembered when I read your book. The another was when Mr. Manohar Parrikar was the defense minister. He did the same, organized a meeting in Delhi of researchers who were working in strategic studies, security studies from outside of Delhi. Eventually, that international relations conference which the MEA had organized, it ended. The idea was to start similar activities every year. That did not happen It did not happen because I think the JNU or the Delhi Mafia took over, and it ceased to be outside of Delhi, non-Delhi centric. I'm a student of JNU. I can use the word Delhi Mafia or JNU Mafia. Ambassador Devare's book brings back these memories, which is why I'm referring to that. Brings back because his approach to each of the areas that he has discussed, areas like Sikkim, Myanmar, Korea, Ukraine, Indonesia, are not Delhi-centric. He tackles each case with a kind of care, concern, feeling of goodwill. He's not condescending. Pardon me for saying this. He's not condescending. He tries to understand them, not just explain what is happening. And I thank him for this very fresh approach when one is talking of diplomacy. Academic gossip, if I might add, of ICWA. Ambassador Devare is a very soft-spoken diplomat who is firm, but with a velvet glove. He seeks to have a dialogue and listens to the other person. This is the academic gossip in Delhi. Let me make a mention of 3 or 4 issues that you have raised. One is Sikkim, and I was interested in Sikkim because I've been there quite some time. He mentions about the way in which Chogyal was removed. Democratic government came in there. This is what I discussed with him a couple of days ago. My understanding about Sikkim prior to reading this was a different kind of an understanding. I was told by some very senior people in Sikkim who had experienced 1975, 76, etc., that Sikkim's merger with India was done by 3 Devias, Teen Devia. One was Mrs. Indira Gandhi. The other was Chogyal's wife. Hope Cook was an American. And the third was the Qazi's wife, who was a Belgian. They are the ones who really managed to ensure that Sikkim becomes part of India. Agitations which took place, etc. And Qazi, the argument which was made was, it was a fight between 2 Bhutias, the Chogyal and the Qazi, for search for power. And eventually, of course, Qazi became the chief minister. Now, this is the other side of Sikkim which I got from them. The side which Ambassador Devare has written about the book gives me a whole picture now in terms of what must have happened there. And Sikkim is important. His first posting, and he writes about it. It was the center for the Tibet cadre, the British Tibet cadre. So, relevance of Sikkim is something which one must keep in mind. But thank you for this complete story which I was able to gather about Sikkim. The other he writes about is the Berlin Wall. He was there when the Berlin Wall collapsed, Brandenburg Gate. And what I did want to know at that time, India was supposedly neutral, officially neutral. But was India unofficially neutral also? That is something which I did not ask you, but probably you could talk about it. I also asked him whether it brought back a piece of the Berlin Wall. They were sold. I was in Colorado at that time. They were sold for $10, $20. The better the images on that, he said he has that piece. I am tempted. I do not know whether this is the right place to talk about it. Pieces of Berlin Wall were sold. This is real market economics. Bricks of the Babri Masjid were not sold. They were distributed all over India. Whatever. Then about Ukraine. You're right when you talk about the concept of identity. state identity of Ukrainians. That is also seen in the language. So language and identity are very closely associated. Assertion of language identity in terms of the Ukrainians. There would, of course, be stories about how much American interference was there in Ukraine, Maidan Revolution of 2014, whether it was correct on part of the Americans to do what they did, etc. Those are matters of history. But I was happy to read the manner in which you've proceeded with Ukraine, not only in the history, but in terms of what is happening in the contemporary picture. Southeast Asia, you've had a close association. You continue to have a close association. You made a mention of Look East. This is probably not part of your book, I can understand. But success of Look East from an Indian perspective would really depend upon how we treat Northeast India in India, in terms of building infrastructure, building things there, so that the linkage between the Northeast states and the other countries would be critical to get the benefits of Look East in the real sense. But as I said, Look East was a revolutionary concept. You were associated with it in terms of its origin. It was a necessary concept. I think after Bandung, that was the first time that we really seriously looked at the East. What I really liked about your comments about Fiji, in terms of brief comments, is that when you're looking at impacts of what the diplomats do in wherever they are, don't look at immediate impacts. Look at the long-term impact that one would have to really understand, because what you're doing is probably sowing seeds. Eventually things grow. So look at the long-term impact that is far more important than an immediate impact which an ambassador there, a representative there, or whatever can really generate. Finally, let me conclude with many years ago I had done a project on the parliament and foreign policy, role of the parliament. Though I was focusing on nuclear issues, basically what does parliament do in terms of foreign policy? I had talked to several parliamentarians, retired, almost 30, 35 of them, and some very senior, people like Salman Khurshid or Gujral or Jaswant Singh or Natwar Singh, etc. The insight which I got from them, and this is something which you can clarify, was that there always will be turf wars in terms of the manner in which things are likely to be evolved, which basically means that if one is to try to create some impact in terms of policy, at one level you go to the bureaucracy and put inputs in the bureaucracy. At the other level, you go to the political class and put impacts in terms of in the political class, so that together you're able to create some kind of impact on public policy. Some of that I was associated with some many years ago when Professor M.L. Sondi was there, and we worked together. He used to be my guide at one time. But this aspect of the bureaucracy, whether it is the MEA, whether it is... one of the questions which I had asked the MEA when the conference had taken place is, you're talking of foreign policy, you're talking of international relations and foreign policy, why did you not invite the MOD also in that? There was no answer. The answer that was given to me later on was, again, don't forget we have turf wars. And that perhaps is our problem. But it was a pleasure reading your book. It gives a very different kind of insight to what is happening around, an insider's view, if you want to call it. I think this is something which one must really read. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
नमस्कार. या कार्यक्रमाचे अध्यक्ष विजय केळकर यांच्या अनुमतीनं मी मराठीत बोलायचं ठरवलं आहे. ॲम्बॅसेडर देवरे यांचं हे पुस्तक म्हणजे ज्यांना ज्यांना आंतरराष्ट्रीय संबंध या विषयामध्ये थोडासुद्धा रस आहे त्यांच्यासाठी खूप नवं काहीतरी येणार आहे, याच्यामध्ये काही शंका नाही. हे सगळं पुस्तक मी जवळजवळ 2 वेळा वाचून काढलं. याचं कारण याच्यामध्ये इतके नवे संदर्भ आहेत आणि ते आपल्याला संपन्न करत आहेत. सर्वसाधारणपणे अलीकडच्या काळामध्ये आपल्याकडच्या अनेकांना आंतरराष्ट्रीय राजकारणातलं जास्त कळायला लागलं आणि सगळ्यातलंच कळायला लागलं आपल्याला. आणि ते कळत असताना आपल्या भोवतीचे सिनेमे, आपण बघत असले वेबसिरीज, याच्यातून एक आपला दूतावास असतो, त्याच्यामध्ये एक आपला ॲम्बॅसेडर असतो आणि मग आपला एक स्पाय तिथं जातो आणि तो स्पाय सगळ्या उलटापालटी करत असतो. अशा प्रकारच्या मसालेदार गोष्टी आपण बघतो आणि आपली सुरक्षाविषयक कल्पना, आपली जिओ पॉलिटिक्सविषयी कल्पना, या सगळ्या अशा काही ते विचित्र विक्षिप्त कल्पनांभोवती गुंफण्याची शक्यता असते. असा कुठलाही मसाला ॲम्बॅसेडर देवळे यांच्या या पुस्तकात नाही. तरी पण ज्याला असं म्हटलं जातं की वास्तव हे कल्पितापेक्षा जास्त रंजक असतं किंवा जास्त परिणामकारक असतं, तसं वास्तव, अतिशय भेदक वास्तव या पुस्तकामध्ये आहे. आणि ते एका अर्थानं देवळे सरांची ही प्रोफेशनल ॲटोबायोग्राफी आहे. म्हणजे त्यांनी जे प्रोफेशनल आयुष्य जगले त्याचं आत्मचरित्र आहे. आणि ते लिहित असताना त्यांना जे समोर दिसलं ते तर त्यांनी लिहिलंच. आणि मगापासून सगळ्यांनी सांगितलं की जगातल्या मोठ्या उलटापालटी झाल्या. म्हणजे अनेक वेळेला अलीकडे आणखी एक आपण माध्यमातून बघतो की काही झालं की त्याला आपण ऐतिहासिक म्हणतो, कशालाही मास्टर स्ट्रोक म्हणतो. हे म्हणजे अलीकडच्या माध्यमांनी रूढ केलेल्या काही कन्सेप्ट आहेत. पण देवळे यांनी ज्या गोष्टी अनुभवल्या त्या खऱ्या अर्थानं मागच्या शतकातल्या जगाला वळण लावणाऱ्या घडामोडी होत्या. आणि त्या मगापासून आपण ऐकल्या, त्या पुस्तकात खूप सविस्तरपणे वर्णन केले आहेत. सोव्हिएत संघाचं पतन होताना किंवा सोव्हिएत संघ अगदी भयात असताना, जेव्हा शीतयुद्ध टिपेला होतं त्या काळातला सोव्हिएत संघ त्यांनी अनुभवला. सोव्हिएत संघ पडतानाचा अनुभव घेतला. बर्लिनची वॉल कोसळली आणि दोन्ही जर्मनी एकत्र आल्या, तो अनुभव त्यांनी घेतला. सिक्कीमचा राजा, ज्याला स्वतंत्र राहायचं स्वप्न होतं, ते स्वप्न भंग झालं आणि सिक्कीम भारतात विलीन झालं. त्याच्या आधीचा जो एक टर्ब्युलंट काळ आहे तो त्यांनी तिथं अनुभवला. तर अशा जगाला वळण लावणाऱ्या महत्त्वाच्या घडामोडी त्यांनी अनुभवल्या, त्याविषयी लिहिलंच आहे. ते लिहित असताना माझ्या मते लेखक म्हणून देवळे खूप यशस्वी ठरले. याचं कारण अतिशय शैलीदारपणे ते लिहिलं आहे. हे सर्वसाधारणपणे ज्याच्याकडे खूप अनुभव असतो असे लोक लिहिताना खूप जड लिहितात किंवा जॉर्गनमध्ये लिहितात. जिओ पॉलिटिक्स, जिओ इकॉनॉमिक्स, जिओ स्ट्रॅटेजी, अशी जॉर्गन आली की माणसं कान बंद करतात. तर अशा गोष्टींचा फार अवडंब न माजवता अतिशय सुलभपणे ती या सगळ्या कन्सेप्ट या पुस्तकातून आपल्यासमोर आणतात. ते त्यांचं बलस्थान आहे. दुसरं बलस्थान मला असं वाटतं की हा सगळा पट त्यांच्यासमोरून गेला आहे. म्हणजे ते एकाच वेळेला ऑब्झर्व्ह आहेत, दुसऱ्या बाजूला ते या घटना घडत असताना त्यातलं एक पात्र पण आहेत. कारण भारताच्या वतीनं काहीतरी एक भूमिका पण आहे त्यांची तिथं. तर असा सगळा काळ जसा घडलं तसं मांडलंच. म्हणजे मी जर्नलिझममध्ये 33 वर्ष आहे आणि आम्हाला असं शिकवलं जायचं की जे घडलं ते जसंच्या तसं सांगायचं म्हणजे बातमी. ते का घडलं हे शोधायचं, त्याची सूत्र शोधायची म्हणजे शोधपत्रिका. आणि त्याचं पुढं काय होणार याच्यावर भाष्य करायचं म्हणजे प्रगल्भपत्रिका. आता हे होतं की नाही हा वेगळा भाग, त्याच्यावर आपण आता बोलायला नको. पण हे सगळं देवळे यांच्या पुस्तकामध्ये आहे. म्हणजे ते व्हॉट, हाऊ आणि व्हॉट नेक्स्ट या तिन्ही प्रश्नांची उत्तर या सगळ्या घडामोडींच्या संदर्भात देतात. आणि ते देत असताना कसं घडलं याचं ते न्यायालय आहे. आणि ते अतिशय रसाळ पद्धतीनं एखादा ललित लेखक लिहितो त्या पद्धतीने लिहिलं. मला वाटतं सर तुम्ही फिक्शन पण लिहायला हरकत नाही, इतकं तुमची शैली उत्तम आहे. तर तो भाग आहेच, हाऊ पार्ट त्यामध्ये आहे. पण व्हाय हे असं का घडलं, तर तो मला वाटतं ते विश्लेषण करत असताना ते इतिहासात जातात, ते त्याची सांस्कृतिक ताणेबाणे शोधतात, ते सामाजिक संदर्भ शोधतात, भारत आणि त्या देशांचे रिलेशन शोधतात. म्हणजे कोरियामध्ये टागोरांचा प्रभाव, महात्मा गांधींचा प्रभाव, बुद्धाचा प्रभाव, असं वेगवेगळ्या देशातले भारताचे प्राचीन संबंध शोधत आहेत. आणि त्या देशातलं कल्चर, सबकल्चर आणि तिथलं अर्थकारण की जे प्रामुख्यानं अशा सगळ्या मोठ्या उलटापालटींच्या मुळाशी असतं. हे सगळं असे धागे शोधून उलगडून आपल्याला दाखवत आहेत. आणि त्या अर्थानं त्यांचं विश्लेषण अतिशय प्रगल्भ असं आहे. आणि त्यानंतरचा जो भाग आहे तो व्हॉट नेक्स्ट. ते मग त्या प्रत्येक गोष्टीचा आजच्या काळाशी संदर्भ जोडायचा प्रयत्न करतात किंवा जोडतात. मग रशियाचं, सोव्हिएत संघाचं पतन झालं, रशिया युक्रेन युद्ध, आणि मग त्याचं आता काय, इंडोनेशिया ॲक्ट ईस्ट पॉलिसी लुक इज पॉलिसी, ॲक्ट इज पॉलिसी आणि आता त्याचं पुढं काय. तर अशा प्रत्येक गोष्टीला आजशी जोडायचा प्रयत्न करतात. त्या अर्थानं हे पुस्तक एक हिस्टॉरिक अकाउंट आहे, एक ॲनालिसिस आहे, त्याचबरोबर ते आजच्या वर्तमानाशी जोडलं आहे आणि त्या अर्थानं पण ते खूप महत्त्वाचं पुस्तक आहे असं मला वाटतं. त्यांची पहिली पोस्टिंग ही सोव्हिएत संघातली मॉस्कोची होती आणि मॉस्कोचा तो काळ अतिशय उत्तम पद्धतीनं आपल्यापुढे त्यांनी उभं केला आहे. म्हणजे तो कम्युनिस्ट पोलारी पडदा, ती भयंकर नोकरशाही, म्हणजे ते असं म्हणतात की आपण आपल्या नोकरशाहीला नावं ठेवतो, पण त्याच्यापेक्षा पुढचा टप्पा म्हणजे सोव्हिएत संघाची नोकरशाही होती आणि तिथं कुठल्याही प्रश्नाचं उत्तर नो नेती एवढंच होतं. आणि त्याची ती खूप सुंदर उदाहरणं देतात. त्यांच्या नवजात मुलाला मॉस्कोतून परत येताना सगळ्यांना व्हिसा दिला आणि त्याचा व्हिसा नाही म्हणून विमानतळावर अडवलं. म्हणजे असं फक्त सोव्हिएत संघातच घडू शकतं. तर ते असे पर्सनल अकाउंट सांगताना ते सोव्हिएत संघाचं कॅरेक्टर मांडतात त्या काळातलं. आणि अशी व्यक्तिगत उदाहरणं अनेक ठिकाणी आहेत आणि किस्से म्हणता येतील ते अनेक ठिकाणी आहेत. पण त्या किस्स्यांच्या पलीकडं त्या काळात तिथले लोक, तिथली समाजव्यवस्था आणि तिथले राजकीय नेतृत्व कसं वागतं याचं पण दर्शन आपल्याला घडतं. सोव्हिएत संघ का पडला याच्याविषयी अनेकांनी अनेक ठिकाणी लिहून ठेवलं आहे. आणि जे लिहिणारे वाचणारे लोक आहेत त्यापैकी प्रत्येकाचं आपलं म्हणून एक आकलन आहे सोव्हिएत संघाविषयी. काही जणांचं खूप रोमॅन्टिक आहे, कारण कम्युनिझम हा अनेकांसाठीचा रोमॅन्टिसिझमचा मुद्दा असतो. तर कम्युनिझमच मुळात खोट होती त्यामध्ये. तिथंपासून ते हे भांडवलशाहीचं षडयंत्र होतं. इथंपर्यंतच्या वेगवेगळ्या स्पेक्ट्रममध्ये सोव्हिएत संघाचं पतन का झालं याचं विश्लेषण अनेकांनी केलेलं आहे आणि आपल्यापैकी अनेकांच्या मनात अशा वेगवेगळं आकलन असण्याची शक्यता आहे. देवळे साहेबांच्या या पुस्तकामध्ये तो काळ अशा पद्धतीनं उभा केला आहे की किती वेगवेगळ्या प्रकारचे फोर्सेस काम करत आहेत. म्हणजे आतून समाज कसा धक्के मारत असतो, अर्थकारण कसं धक्के मारत असतं. जी एक सुपर पॉवर म्हणून ओळखली जात होती त्या सुपर पॉवरच्या आत अर्थकारण इतकं गणलं होतं आजच्या भाषेत सांगायचं की ते कधीतरी घडणारच होतं. आणि त्याचा एक अतिशय उत्तम अकाउंट आपल्यापुढं देवळेचं मांडतात. आणि त्यानंतर मग जेव्हा सोव्हिएत संघचं विघटन झालं, गोरबाचेवने खुलेपणा आणला, रेगन गोरबाचेव बोलणी झाली, वगैरे गोष्टी झाल्या आणि सोव्हिएत संघचा विघटन झालं आणि त्यातून युक्रेनिया, आर्मेनिया, जॉर्जिया यासारखे आणि सगळे स्थान वेगळे आहेत, हे सगळे देश स्वतंत्र झाले. त्यातल्या युक्रेन, आर्मेनिया आणि जॉर्जियाचे राजदूत म्हणून देवळे साहेबांना पहिले राजदूत बनायची संधी मिळाली. आणि नवे देश आकारत असताना त्याचे जे जन्मकाळ आहेत त्यावेळेचा जो ताण आहे तो ताण ते अतिशय निगुतीनं आपल्यासमोर मांडतात. आणि एखादं राष्ट्र स्वतंत्र होतं तेव्हा कुठले प्रश्न असतात. म्हणजे साधा प्रश्न आहे की सोव्हिएत संघाच्या काळात विद्यार्थ्यांना खूप सवलती दिल्या जात होत्या आणि आपल्याकडचे विद्यार्थी पण त्या सवलती मिळवत होते. युक्रेन स्वतंत्र झाल्यानंतर या सवलती पुढे ठेवता येणं युक्रेनला कदाचित शक्य नव्हतं आणि अचानक सवलती बंद केल्या तर मुलांचा मोठा प्रश्न तयार होणार होता. तो प्रश्न त्यांनी कसा सोडवला मुळातून वाचण्यासारखा आहे. तर अशा अनेक गोष्टी आहेत की ज्या या पुस्तकात त्यांचा अनुभव म्हणून वाचण्यासारख्या आहेत. त्याचबरोबर त्या काळात तो देश कसा वागत होता किंवा त्या देशातलं वास्तव काय होतं हे पण आपल्यासमोर येतं. रशियाविषयीचं त्यांचं जे आकलन आहे किंवा त्यांचं जे ऑब्झर्वेशन आहे की रशिया, सोव्हिएत संघ, त्याचा वारसदार रशिया आणि मग तो आता पुन्हा स्वतःला ॲसर्ट करतो आहे जगाच्या पटलावर. तेव्हा युक्रेनचं युद्ध सुरू झाल्यानंतर 3 वर्षानं रशियाचं खूप मोठं नुकसान झालं आहे. युक्रेनची तर धुळधाणच झाली आहे पण रशियाचं पण खूप मोठं नुकसान झालं आहे. आणि त्या पार्श्वभूमीवर देवळेचं असं निरीक्षण म्हणतायत की रशिया ही तरीसुद्धा एक जगातली मोठी शक्ती असेल. याचं कारण काय तर प्रचंड रिसोर्सेस असलेला देश आहे, खूप तंत्रज्ञानात ॲडव्हान्स असलेला देश आहे, आधुनिक शस्त्र असलेला देश आहे आणि अण्वस्त्र असलेला देश आहे. मला एक प्रश्न नेहमी पडतो की जर रशियाचं विघटन झालं, युक्रेन वेगळा झाला, तेव्हा युक्रेननं आपल्याकडची अण्वस्त्र दिलीच नसती तर युक्रेनचं युद्ध झालं असतं का? कदाचित त्या एका भीतीपोटी ते युद्ध टळलं असतं. पण या इतिहासातल्या जळताच्या गोष्टी आहेत. तर अशा अनेक गोष्टी असलेला रशिया हा भविष्यात सुद्धा एक महत्त्वाची शक्ती राहणार आहे, हे त्यांचं ऑब्झर्वेशन व्हॅलिड मानायला हरकत नाही. त्याचबरोबर या रशिया भारत या संबंधामध्ये चीन नावाचा एक कोण आता यायला लागला आहे. त्याच्याकडे बोट दाखवत आहेत आणि हे अतिशय महत्त्वाचं आहे असं मला वाटतं आजच्या कॉन्टेक्स्टमध्ये. याचं कारण 71च्या युद्धामध्ये रशिया पूर्णपणे भारताच्या बाजूनं होता आणि अमेरिका पाकिस्तानच्या बाजूनं होता. तेव्हा चीन काही पाकिस्तानला मदत करावी अशा स्थितीत नव्हता. म्हणजे मिलिटरीलाही तितका पॉवरफुल नव्हता आणि इकॉनॉमिकली तरी नव्हता. पण आपण पुलवामानंतर जेव्हा ऑपरेशन सिंधूर झालं तेव्हा बघितलं की पाकिस्तानची बहुतेक सगळी शस्त्रसामग्री जी भारताच्या विरोधात वापरली ती चिनी बनावटीची होती आणि इलेक्ट्रॉनिक कोऑर्डिनेशनच्या ज्या सगळ्या सिस्टम आहेत त्या सगळ्या चिनी बनावटीच्या होत्या. म्हणजे ऑल वेदर फ्रेंडशिप असलेले चीन आणि पाकिस्तान आणि तसंच युक्रेन युद्धानंतर रशिया आणि चीनची जवळीक ही भविष्यातल्या आपल्या पाकिस्तानसोबतच्या संबंधात आणि कदाचित होऊ नये पण झालाच तर संघर्षावेळी एक मेजर रोल प्ले करण्याची शक्यता आहे. त्या अर्थानं चीन, रशिया, पाकिस्तान आणि भारत या संबंधांकडे भविष्यात बघितलं पाहिजे. याचं ओझं दिग्दर्शन देवळे सर करतात आणि मला वाटतं ते खूप महत्त्वाचं आहे. दक्षिण कोरियाविषयी त्यांनी असंच त्यांची खूप छान ऑब्झर्वेशन मांडली आहेत की जो देश युद्धानं होरपळलेला होता, भुके कंगाल होता, रोजगार नव्हते आणि ॲटोक्रॅसीच्या टाचेखाली असला देश, कसलीच स्वातंत्र्य नसला देश, तो देश 30-35 वर्षामध्ये म्हणजे मिराकल वाटावं, चमत्कार वाटावा अशा प्रकारची आर्थिक प्रगती करतो. आणि याच्यामध्ये त्यांनी स्वीकारलेली विशिष्ट प्रकारची धोरणं आहेत. ती धोरणं त्यांनी काय केलं, दक्षिण कोरियानं प्रामुख्यानं एका विशिष्ट क्षेत्रात 1 किंवा 2 कंपन्यांना सरकारचा पूर्ण आशीर्वाद असेल आणि त्यांना सगळ्या प्रकारची मोकळीक असेल आणि त्यातून सॅमसंगसारख्या, हुंडाईसारख्या खूप बलाढ्य कंपन्या साकारल्या आणि ते एक वेगळं आर्थिक मॉडेल, एशियन टायगर्सचं मॉडेल, त्याच्यापेक्षा थोडं वेगळं मॉडेल दक्षिण कोरियानं स्वीकारलं. एक उत्तम किस्सा त्याच्यामध्ये देवळे साहेबांनी दिला. एक भारतातल्या कंपनीचा CMD सॅमसंगसोबत चर्चा करण्यासाठी कोरियामध्ये गेले होते आणि सॅमसंगसोबत चर्चा करताना म्हणजे त्या काळातली आपली स्वप्न पण किती तोकडी होती. तर ते CMD असं सांगत होते की मायक्रोवेव्ह ओव्हनचं उत्पादन करायचं आहे जॉईंट व्हेंचरमध्ये सॅमसंग आणि या कंपनीमध्ये, भारतीय कंपनीमध्ये. तर त्या सॅमसंगवाल्यांनी विचारलं की किती युनिट्स करणार आहात. यांनी सांगितलं मी 5,000 करणार आहे, कारण आपलं स्वप्नच तेवढं होतं. तर केवळ 5,000 आकडा ऐकून त्यांचा त्यातला इंटरेस्ट संपला, कारण त्यांची अपेक्षा होती लाखात उत्पादन व्हावं. म्हणजे लाखात उत्पादन व्हावं असे ॲस्पिरेशन असलेली सॅमसंगसारखी कंपनी आणि उदारीकरणापूर्वीचा म्हणजे 90 पूर्वीचा भारत की जो सगळीच स्वप्न अतिशय टोकडी बघत होता, ते एक वास्तव या पुस्तकातून आपल्यासमोर. त्यानंतर तो काळ बदलला. आता आपले उद्योजक मोठी मोठी स्वप्न बघायला लागले. तर त्याचं एक सुंदर नॅरेशन या पुस्तकामधून आलेलं आहे. बर्लिन वॉल पडली त्याचंही, आणि तो एका अर्थानं कम्युनिझम संपला याची द्वाही फिरवणारा तो इव्हेंट होता. जगाचं ज्याच्याकडं लक्ष होतं असा तो इव्हेंट होता. आणि आज जे काही घडतं आहे मला वाटते त्याची मुळं कुठंतरी जर्मनीच्या युनिफिकेशनमध्ये आहेत. आज ज्या प्रकारचं जिओपॉलिटिक्स आकाराला येते आपल्या भोवताली, त्याची मुळं निश्चितपणे किंवा शीतयुद्धानंतर जी काही जगाच्या फौजदारीची भूमिका अमेरिकेने घेतली त्याच्यामध्ये त्या घटनेचा मोठा वाटा होता. त्याचंही एक चांगला आलेख या पुस्तकामध्ये आलेला आहे. मला वाटतं की या सगळ्या जगाला वळण लावणाऱ्या घटना आणि तिथं त्यांच्या नशिबानं किंवा एक आव्हानात्मक पोझिशन म्हणून देवळे साहेबांना तिथं काम करायची संधी मिळाली. पण त्यापेक्षा माझ्या मते सगळ्यात महत्त्वाचं कॉन्ट्रिब्युशन किंवा सगळ्यात महत्त्वाचा भाग आहे तो त्यांचं लुक ईस्ट पॉलिसीमधलं कॉन्ट्रिब्युशन, जे इंडोनेशियामध्ये राजदूत असताना त्याचं फाउंडेशन घालण्याचं भाग्य किंवा नशिबानं त्यांना ती संधी मिळाली. आणि नंतर परराष्ट्र खात्यामध्ये सचिव असताना ती पॉलिसी प्रत्यक्षात आली. आपला जो अलीकडचा राष्ट्रीय छंद आहे की नावं बदलायचा, त्यानुसार लुक ईस्ट पॉलिसीचा आता आपण ॲक्ट ईस्ट पॉलिसी केलेला आहे. त्याच्यामध्ये काही नवीन गोष्टी पण ॲड केल्या, पण नावं बदलण्याचा छंद आपला आपण पूर्ण केलेला आहे. त्याची लुक ईस्ट पॉलिसी आहे ती एशियन देशासंदर्भात किंवा ईस्ट एशियन देशासंदर्भातली पॉलिसी आहे. आणि हे देश सांस्कृतिकदृष्ट्या भारताशी इतके जवळीक असले पण शीतयुद्धामध्ये संपूर्ण दुर्लक्ष झालेले. आणि त्याच्यामुळं भारताला आपण जे म्हणतो ना, नेहमी आपल्याला स्वप्न पडत असतात की भारत एक मोठी शक्ती व्हावी, जगावर आपण प्रभाव टाकावं वगैरे वगैरे. तर हे या असं जर काही घडायचं असेल तर त्यासाठी आपले या देशांशी संबंध आणि व्यापार अतिशय उत्तम असायला पाहिजे. म्हणजे जेव्हा ट्रम्प यांचं उटपटांग धोरण सुरू झालं सगळ्या जगाला भेटीला जाणार, तेव्हा सिंगापूरच्या पंतप्रधानांचं एक भाषण त्यांनी केलं आणि त्या भाषणात ते असं सांगत होते की आता अमेरिका असंच वागणार आहे. म्हणजे जसं जेम्स कार्नींचं भाषण गाजतं वर्ल्ड इकॉनॉमिक फोरममधलं, तसं त्या सिंगापूरच्या पंतप्रधानांचं भाषण त्या काळात चर्चेत होतं. ते म्हणाले की असंच चालणार आहे. तर आपल्याला हे जे साऊथ ईस्ट एशियन देश आहेत म्हणजे एशियामधले जे सगळे देश आहेत, या देशांनी एकमेकांमधला व्यापार वाढवणं आणि अमेरिकेवरचं अवलंबित्व कमी करणं हा मार्ग आहे. हे खूप आधीपासून हे देश करत आहेत आणि आपण त्याच्यापासून खूप लांब आहे. अलीकडचा एक सर्वे असं सांगतो आहे की या सगळ्या एशियन देशांमधल्या लोकांमध्ये त्यांच्या मते पॉलिटिकली सुरक्षेच्या अंगानं आणि इकॉनॉमिकली सगळ्यात रिलेव्हंट देश कुठला तर तो चीन आहे. 47% लोक असं म्हणतात की तो चीन आहे आणि 24-25% लोक म्हणतात की तो अमेरिका आहे. आणि भारत आहे असं म्हणणारे लोक 1% कमी आहेत. हा 2 वर्षापूर्वीचा सर्वे आहे. म्हणजेच या सगळ्या प्रयत्नांनंतर अजूनही आपल्याविषयी या देशांमध्ये काही खूप अशी आस्था तयार झाली नाही. आणि ती तयार होणं म्हणजे लुक ईस्ट किंवा ॲक्ट ईस्ट पॉलिसीचं खऱ्या अर्थानं यश असायला पाहिजे. असे ब्लॉक होण्याचं महत्त्व काय, तर हे सगळे एशियन देश आहेत, तर यांचा ब्लॉक म्हणजे युरोपियन युनियन सोडला तर हा एकच असा इतका सॉलिड ब्लॉक आहे की जो एकमेकांमध्ये बहुतेक सगळे बॅरियर टाळून व्यापार करतो आणि एकमेकाशी बऱ्याच अंशी एकसंघ झाला आहे. म्हणजे ताण संपलेत का तर नाही, मतभेद संपलेत का तर नाही, पण ट्रेड ब्लॉक म्हणून तो एकत्र उभा यायचा प्रयत्न करतो आहे. मला वाटतं की दक्षिण आशियातल्या देशांनी याच्यातून काहीतरी शिकण्यासारखं आहे की आपल्यामध्ये ताण आहेत, आपल्यामध्ये स्पर्धा आहे, आपल्यामध्ये संघर्ष आहे, पण आपल्यात सांस्कृतिक एकरूपता आहे, आपल्यामध्ये अनेक अशा गोष्टी आहेत की समान आहेत. तर हे ताण संघर्ष टाळून जर एकत्र येता आलं किमान व्यापारासाठी तर आपले बरेच प्रश्न हलके होण्याची शक्यता आहे. कारण जेव्हा माणसे एकमेकाशी बोलायला लागतात, जेव्हा सांस्कृतिक आदानप्रदान व्हायला लागतं, तेव्हा जिओ पॉलिटिकल तणाव आपोआप निवडायला सुरू होतात. तर जे एशियन कंट्रीजनी घडवलं ते साऊथ एशियन कंट्रीजना का घडवता येत नाही. म्हणजे एशियनच्या समिट ह्या गाजतात, पण सार्क जवळजवळ बंद पडला आहे. तर मला वाटतं की त्याच्यापासून शिकण्यासारखं आहे आणि त्यामध्ये या लुक ईस्ट पॉलिसीचा खूप मोठा सहभाग असेल. त्याचे एक आर्किटेक्ट म्हणून देवळे साहेबांनी जे काही काम केलं ते या पुस्तकामध्ये अतिशय उत्तमपणे नमूद केलेलं आहे. या पुस्तकाचा आणखी एक महत्त्वाचा भाग ज्याचा ॲम्बॅसेडर मुळे यांनी उल्लेख केला की आत्ता ज्या प्रकारच्या जगामध्ये आपण वावरतो आहोत ते जग खूप शीतयुद्धानंतरच्या जगापेक्षा खूपच वेगळं, अतिशय अस्वस्थ असं. कदाचित दुसऱ्या महायुद्धापूर्वीचं जे दशक होतं की प्रचंड अस्वस्थ असलेलं दशक, तशा दशकामध्ये आत्ता आपण आहोत की ज्यामध्ये कुणालाच भविष्याचं भाकीत करणं कठीण आहे. म्हणजे फ्रान्सिस फुकुयामाचा आत्ता उल्लेख झाला, तर या महान माणसानं 90मध्ये आज सांगितलं होतं की जगाला अंतिमतः असं एक मॉडेल सापडलं आहे ज्याच्यामध्ये लिबरल डेमोक्रेसी आणि मुक्त अर्थव्यवस्था किंवा जागतिकीकरण हे आता अंतिम आहे, बाकी सगळं लक्ष द्यायचं कारण नाही. 30 वर्षामध्ये आपण बघतो आहोत की लिबरलिझम, डेमोक्रेसी आणि मुक्त अर्थव्यवस्था या तिन्ही पुढं प्रचंड आव्हानं उभी राहिली आहेत. आणि ही सगळी जी ज्याला आपण जागतिक रचना किंवा वर्ल्ड ऑर्डर म्हणतो ती दुसऱ्या महायुद्धानंतर 2 गोष्टींवर आधारलेली होती. एक तर पुन्हा युद्ध होऊ नये म्हणजे सुरक्षा, आणि दुसरी अर्थकारण. नंतर 2 ब्लॉक झाले, सुएझ संघाचा ब्लॉक, अमेरिकेचा ब्लॉक, वेगळे वेगळे. पण या 2 गोष्टी अचीव करण्यासाठी प्रामुख्यानं ही रचना दुसऱ्या महायुद्धाच्या शेवटी आकाराला आली होती. आता याच्यामध्ये जी गृहीतकं होती ती सगळी गृहीतकं अमेरिका उधळून लावते आहे. मुक्त अर्थव्यवस्थेची सगळी गृहीतकं उधळून लावली जात आहेत. म्हणजे श्रीमंत देशांनी कर कमी ठेवावा, गरीब देशांनी जास्त आयात शुल्क लावावं, हे नेमकं उलटं अमेरिका करते आणि भारतावर 18% टेरिफ लावते आणि अमेरिकेच्या मालाला मात्र आपण 0% टेरिफ लावावं असं म्हणते. आणि हे सगळ्या जगासोबत अमेरिका असं करते. तर हे जे त्यासोबतच ग्रीनलँड आम्हाला पाहिजे, कॅनडा आमचं 51 राज्य व्हायला पाहिजे, पनामावर आमचा ताबा पाहिजे, या प्रकारच्या ज्या सगळ्या गोष्टी आत्ता चालू आहेत त्या 10 वर्षापूर्वी कुणी अंदाजही केला नव्हता किंवा कल्पनाही केली नव्हती, अशा प्रकारच्या गोष्टी आहेत. त्यामुळे जागतिक राजकारणामध्ये खूप पुढचं भाकीत करणं खूप धोक्याचं असतं. तर अशा एका अतिशय टर्ब्युलंट अशा काळामध्ये आपण आहोत. आणि तेव्हा शीतयुद्धामध्ये किंवा त्याच्याही आधी ज्या काही जगाला वळण लावणाऱ्या घडामोडी घडल्या त्या घडामोडी घडत असताना नेमकं काय घडलं आणि त्याचे परिणाम काय झाले हे कदाचित भविष्यातला हा जो टर्ब्युलंट पिरियड आहे त्यातून नेव्हिगेट होण्यासाठी उपयोगाचं ठरू शकतं. त्या अर्थानं पण या पुस्तकाचं महत्त्व आहे किंवा या पुस्तकात जो काही ऐवज आपल्यासमोर येतो त्याचं महत्त्व आहे. डिप्लोमसीची परिभाषा पण बदलते. मला वाटतं की देवळे साहेब किंवा मुळे साहेब येत आहेत की आपण सगळी तुमची कारकीर्द झाली असताना कोणी ट्विटरवर कोणाला झापत नसेल किंवा समाज माध्यमातून एखाद्या देशाच्या पंतप्रधानाला, राष्ट्रपतीला शिव्या घालणं होत नसेल, जे ट्रम्प सध्या करत आहेत. ते जेलेन्स्कीला काही म्हणतात, ते कुठल्याही पंतप्रधानाविषयी काही बोलतात, ते कॅनडाच्या पंतप्रधानाला अमेरिकेच्या 51व्या स्टेटचा गव्हर्नर म्हणतात. या प्रकारचा अपमान यापूर्वी डिप्लोमसीमध्ये कोणी केलं नसेल. म्हणजे ही सगळी परिभाषाच एका अर्थानं बदलते. आणि ट्विटरवर डिप्लोमसी होणं ही अत्यंत घातक असं प्रकरण आहे. कारण ट्विटर किंवा या सारखी जी सगळी समाज माध्यमं आहेत ती लाईक्स आणि कॉमेंट्सला भुकेलेली आहेत. आणि लाईक्स आणि कॉमेंट्ससाठी ज्या ज्या वेळेला गंभीर विषय सादर केले जातात किंवा गंभीर राजनय ज्याला म्हणतात तो व्हायला लागतो, तेव्हा जगाची दिशा भरकटलेली असण्याची शक्यता असते. अशी जगाची दिशा भरकटलेली आहे की काय अशा काळामध्ये आपण आहोत. आणि तेव्हा ॲम्बॅसेडर देवळे त्यांच्या ज्ञानाची, अनुभवाची आणि त्यांच्या एकूण विश्लेषण क्षमतेची एक अफाट अशी शिदोरी या पुस्तकामधून आपल्यासमोर आणत आहेत. या पुस्तकाचं सगळ्या जाणत्या वाचकांनी स्वागत केलं पाहिजे. आणि देवळे साहेब, मी पुन्हा आपल्याला विनंती करेन की आपण यापुढे लिहित राहावं. फिक्शन आणि नॉन फिक्शन दोन्ही लिहावं अशी मी आपल्याला विनंती करायला थांबेन. थँक्यू.
Man of the moment, Sudhir. The woman behind this man of the moment, Mrs. Hema Devare, Dr. Kelkar, fellow speakers, diplomats, bureaucrats, retired army officers. I remember the Mark Antony address, friends, Romans, gentlemen. So, in that vein, all of you and ladies and gentlemen, I have broken the protocol because I'm not used to such limelight. So, I left my seat here and joined there. But otherwise also I'm not known for protocol. I'm not known for diplomacy. And the first diplomat I met is Sudhir. I use first name because Sudhir is the eldest, most experienced, most widely traveled, and most patiently listening member of our family. We are co-brothers, Sadhu. Our wives are cousins. And there is a third one who is also here, retired Colonel Anil Kuber. So out of the three Sadhus, two have been with the Indian state and I have been against the Indian state all the time. They have contributed in their own fashion and I have tried to keep the Indian state on track in my own fashion. So, actually I am the odd man out here. I precede Dr. Mashelkar so far as this book is concerned. Dr. Mashelkar, I read it in the manuscript form, or rather in the first draft form, most of it. Because Sudhir was like a character in some fiction to me at the time of my wedding, my entry into this family, and great curiosity about him. And therefore, whenever chance permitted, I kept on pressing that you should write, you should write. At last he started writing. And the success of the book is evidence that I did not touch the original draft at all. I fully endorse all the nice things which have been mentioned by the previous speakers about this book. But how could this book happen? Now, if you just have a cursory look, Shrikant, मला copy दे. How could somebody write a book like this? See, there are very many ambassadors, there are many diplomats. Everybody has a role model. Role models inspire youth. After they are inspired, the youth aspire for something. Then they perspire, sometimes conspire, and if the conspiracy is boomerang, they professionally expire. Now Sudhir says in this book, when he was just a new entrant in the Foreign Service, by the time I joined the Foreign Service, I believe I had evolved into a sensitive and freedom-loving youth from an independent and democratic country. That is the rub. That is Sudhir Devare. And He just crossed 20, 22, 23 he must have been. So there is no happenstance, there is no coincidence, there is no chance in this book. Sudhir wanted to become a diplomat. He wanted to join the foreign service. He had studied Russian for that. Not only that, he had made an important change in his career. And he has switched over to the basic bachelor's degree in science and then prepared for the ICS competitive exam, ICS and IFS. Nowadays, the age limit has gone so much high. In those days, only 2 attempts were allowed, and the very brilliant ones got through in the first attempt. Sudhir is one of them. See, in this book, we get the feel. Have you ever browsed a railway timetable? If you browse it for half an hour, you feel that you have traveled half the country. Similarly, this book takes us through the second half or the post-1964 decades of the 20th century through half of the world events. And whenever there is something crucial happening, Sudhir is there. I don't know how this happened. I started wondering whether history was following Sudhir or Sudhir was following history. But he is there. He is there when in Burma. I don't like the name Myanmar. Burma is a nice name. We are used to it. He also use most of the times he says Burma only. He is there when Burma is trying to transform itself from a military regime into a democratic society. A religion-based, slightly authoritarian regime becomes democratic in Indonesia. Sudhir is there. Sikkim is to be attached to India. Sudhir is there. The Russian Iron Curtain, worst as it could be. Sudhir is there, and it's not his son, his daughter, who was prevented the visa. His first daughter. Now she is in the United States. Sudhir is there. Berlin Wall comes down, Sudhir is there. Ukraine, Sudhir is there. An insignificant country like Fiji. Devare sahib तिथे पण जाऊन आले. Is Sudhir following history or history following Sudhir? And that's why I said Sudhir's determination, Sudhir's dedication, and Sudhir's steadfastness in his profession, in his career, has paid off. And some of it we get to read in this book. For example, Sudhir has the best chapter in this book, I would now say, is the chapter on Burma. Because all the other chapters, all chapters are good and readable, but to use a term from classical music, there are some bada khyals and some chota khyals. So there are 3 bada khyals in this book. One is on Burma, the second is on Ukraine, and the third is on Indonesia, and the look east and act east policies, and so on. But the chapter on Burma is so meticulously written. The history of Burma, the ethnology of Burma, ethnicity of Burma, the resource situation in Burma, the people of Burma, Burma and India. Not only that, Sudhir did not forget the father of Indian unrest, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, when he was in Burma, he visited the place in Mandalay where Tilak was imprisoned for over 5 years. And he expresses regrets that that place has been pulled down in the name of development. So the chapter on Burma is in a way incomplete chapter because this Burma story is still evolving. We don't know which way Burma will go. And Sudhir has deep concern for the people of Burma, not so much for the politicians of Burma, for the people of Burma. And then like with all neighbors, now Bangladesh is the most recent example, Indians and Burmese share a sort of love-hate relationship, and that also comes out with its background. How the Burmese economy and Burmese bureaucracy was at times dominated by Indians, especially Bengali Indians. You read novels of Sharat Chandra Chatterjee, every other character gets money from Burma. So, because the others have mentioned the other 4 or 5 chapters, I would advise everyone, and especially those who aspire to join the foreign service, they should read this as a basic text, how to study the country you are supposed to work in. Sometimes Sudhir, I don't know whether to call it tongue-in-cheek, but very quietly, very naively makes a statement. At least it appears naive. Sudhir was in Russia, and all our communist leaders, they used to visit Russia. You know why they visited Russia? Because they thought that the Indian state would kill them if they sought treatment in India. So even for minor illnesses, the Dange family and so many other families, they used to go to the Soviet Union. Sudhir just mentions that they came to Russia, they went back, but they never had anything to do with the Indian embassy. Suffice it to say, this explains the failure of communists in India. You see, they had to be Indians first and communists next. They tried to be communists first and Indians only because they were cursed to sort of remain in India. Now, this very subtle statement, or there is one statement about the Southeast Asian nations. Sudhir has warned us, yes, we have deep ties. Southeast Asian nations carry a lot of Sanskrit, lot of Pali, lot of Indian deities are there, temples are there. And he quotes Rabindranath Tagore, when Tagore said, I feel everywhere there is India, but I don't see it about a Southeast Asian country. Sudhir says that, yes, there are cultural ties, there are mythological ties, and there is one more very nice phrase. Somebody said Indonesia is only nominally Islamic. What great transformation will happen in our country if we are only nominally Hindus, nominally Muslims, and nominally other religions. At one time, the situation was such. But now this nominal Hinduism is being kind of forced into a very aggressive political identity. But this subtle statement that Islam is there, but Indonesia is only nominally Islamic country, There are so many observations like that. So in Southeast Asia, especially Sudhir found Sindhis everywhere. Generally, we Maharashtrians know Sindhis as आमच्या कोल्हापूरला निर्वासिताचं दुकान म्हणायचे. Because they immigrated from the old Pakistan, where at the time of partition, and therefore there was a colony of Sindhis next to Kolhapur city, and all the shops, so many shops in Kolhapur city were Sindhi shops. So we looked upon Sindhis as outsiders, or like they were forced upon us. But Sindhis are a leading trading community, and Sindhis are the image of Indians in some parts of the world, comes out in this book. And therefore I feel that this is a must-read book for all. With your permission, I would say this is a politically correct book. And sometimes, if it was slightly politically incorrect, it would have added to the readability. It would have added to the appeal of the book. You see, lay people look at you people as people from some other planet. As Shriram said, that you are all the time traveling. You are very rarely in our country. And so everybody is curious. And then, to fictionalize, you must be having a lot of material. See, ours is a roughshod democracy and throws out uncouth politicians. They must be creating gaffes. Those gaffes must be leading to a lot of guffaws. And then you people probably faced the unenviable task of covering these gaffes of our leaders of the people, pillars of Indian democracy and all that. श्रीराम, तू म्हणतोस ते बरोबर आहे, फिक्शनलाइज करायला पाहिजे. सुधीरने नाही केलं तरी चालेल. Hema Devare is a good fiction writer. So on this occasion, and she is very observant, she can write a similar book on what goes behind the scenes in the various embassies. She can write about the Indian delegations, how they सासूरवाडीला आल्यासारखे वागतात, परदेशात गेल्यावर इंडियन एम्बसीकडे जाऊन हव्या त्या गोष्टी मागतात. Or how she set up in a couple of rooms an embassy of a world's greatest democracy in a couple of rooms in a dilapidated Ukraine hotel. So all this could form the matter for another book. Now, fun apart, I think time and again in this book, Sudhir mentions that India has 2-3 things undoubtedly to give to the world. One is our spiritualism, which is not evident in India, but probably it is marketable outside. India is so fast going materialist way. But if it sells in the world, I have no quarrel on that. Second is Gandhi. I have no quarrel on that also. Sudhir has met and had great affection for the Gandhian South Korean sage-like person. But I think India has moved away and India has moved ahead. For example, we should also be proudly telling the world that we were a colony, but we had defeated the British not only at the political game, but also at the national game, their national game. Cricket is now India's national game, not England's. Like that, the other achievements of India and the new India that is emerging, that should also be represented on the world stage. Lastly, I have a question, a personal question. Pardon me, but diplomacy is like professional bigamy. You have one permanent partner and you have changing partners. And for every changing partner, a diplomat has to remodule, reshape himself or herself. Because unless, yes, you have to protect the interests of India, but unless the other side all feels that you are protecting their interests also, they will not confide in you. So now, that half of your heart must be vacant of the contractual partners which keep changing from time to time. And secondly, between two postings outside, you have spent some time in the country, in the External Affairs Ministry. So, how do you try to fulfill, or how do you try to fill this empty space? You have no more opportunity or function to project India anywhere. You might be going outside. So what I feel is to understand the vacuum of after such a 40 years, most eventful years. As I said, you wanted to live through these eventful times. You earned it, rather, I should say. Because first is your choice of a career in Indian Foreign Service. Second is the choice made by your superiors. If there is trouble, there is complication, there is the need of a really balanced, soft-spoken, but firm, steadfast, and one who has the ability to appear and disappear as the situation demands. So that was the choice made by your superiors in the External Affairs Ministry. So how do we go ahead? I mean, right now, Shriram has painted the picture of the world as it is emerging. See, internationalisms of all sorts have failed. Globalization, liberalization, they have failed. Nationalism all over the world, not only in the United States or not only in Russia, even in our own country, everywhere, nationalism is again threatening all sorts of international understandings and communication channels. Technology has created a misconception that technology can bring equality and harmony all over the world. Terrorists are using all modern technology. So I think the first 40 years of your career as a diplomat, you are documented here. The next, you retired at the turn of the millennium. Again, historical event. He joins when the Cold War was at its height, when the Berlin Wall has just come up. It came up in 61, you joined in 63. He watches the collapse of the Berlin Wall and he retires after 9/11. So again, history has favored you with these chances to witness and be there. I think the next part of one thing is you can fictionalize with the help of Mrs. Devare, and we want somebody to give us a positive, hopeful, civilized vision of the world. Like Tagore said, into that heaven, I will change it to internationalism, to humanism, to not pacifism, but to love of peace, secularism. So how does India march internally, externally? How does India march into the rest of the 21st century? I think that should be the next part of your writing. I'll be very eagerly awaiting it. Thank you.
Friends, we had now our distinguished panelists have given detailed comments, so I'm not going to take any more of your time. First, I want to thank you all. Each of you made a very fascinating observation. I'm going to talk in sort of a personal manner because I've known Sudhir since our childhood. We went to same school. He was, of course, 1 year junior, and in school, 1 year junior is quite a mid school. Immediate totem pole are very, very low. But he was always a star in everything what he did. He was ever. And in our school, what was given highest importance was how school does well in runaway debating competition. And Sudhir was ensured that we always won that competition because he was our opening batsman. So, Sudhir, so reading your book was really very important, as all the speakers have shown. Great learning experience. You know, in my years in the public, I met Delhi and abroad. I had an opportunity to meet a number of people from your tribe. And finally, I came to the two sub-tribes in your tribe. One is cerebral, and the other is not so. And you are just one of those unique cerebral, and this book brings out your uniqueness and great contribution. So I want to thank you for writing this book. I found, as our other speakers have spoken, the best chapter is chapters on the Southeast Asian countries, which you saw. And he's been very modest, but he's one of the important contributors to the country's redesigning our policy of Look East, both as ambassador and, of course, in the Ministry of External Affairs itself. And that is now becoming really the most important part of Indian diplomacy, and we should all thank Sudhir for giving this turn. Otherwise, our obsession was always with the West, but he was the most important. Other thing he doesn't mention, and I wish, that's why I'm going to ask him third book. You said already second book. Third book, he gave a lot of importance to economic aspects of international relationship. In fact, he was secretary in charge of economic relations. And I think he does not do any justice the work he did in that area. Well, the ministry also later on. So your third book, Sudhir, has to be a book on what you did as a secretary ER and also what you did to the whole issue of India's economic. I remember he was to be even when he was in Geneva, he was an important part of Indian delegation on UNCTAD and other conferences. So I think we require a third book which really brings out these aspects of your work. And also, the other complaint I have got, or third book should contain, is Sudhir, you have so much to tell in private conversation. You say so much to say about how policies should be formed, how our economic policies, foreign policy. I think you owe it to us to bring it on book. Your ideas about how policies were formulated. And I remember your discussion of earlier, the policy planning division was an important part of it, but there was no more there. So many other things. So the third book is really required, which what important lesson comes out of this book is that a successful diplomat is really the value-based diplomacy. It's not a Chanakya's vulgar version of Chanakya. And you see this throughout his book. The values really dominate. In that sense, he is really what I call diplomats of Nehru generation. He really was inspired by Nehru's concept of the world, India's commitment to whole democratic values. And that really guided your professional life, and it comes out so vividly in every way what you have written. So I really appreciate that part deeply because it shows the importance of values you have, and somebody mentioned about certain erosion which is taking place, unfortunately, so that we have to reverse. So I would not take any more of your time because we already spent cross time limit our organizers have given to us. But it's a great book. I will urge all of you to buy this book. I think one can buy the book outside. I take it. So, once more, please, we want to dil mange more. We want one more book from you, which is bringing out the analytical aspects of your professional life. So, with this all, I will invite all of you to once again give our warm hand.
Thank you so much to our chair and our panelists for such a comprehensive and intriguing session. We would move forward with the question and answer session. With your permission, sir. I would ask our team to please give us the mics.
Am I audible, sir? So my question to Devare sir is, the Look East policy and BIMSTEC and all of that, there was a lot of discussion about really how to get closer to ASEAN and Burma and so on. But it seems to me these days, and I'm going to be somewhat blunt about this, that, let alone looking east of our own borders towards ASEAN and Southeast Asia, we are actually, from a perspective of Delhi, from Delhi, we are failing to look even eastwards towards the Northeast. And because of a drift away from values-based diplomacy, we are allowing certain elements, and I'll be very explicit about this, Israel and the current dispensation in the United States, to gain an undue amount of influence in the Northeast, specifically through demands like the Cookie Land issue and the change of regime in Bangladesh, the takeover of Chittagong port and so on. And we are looking away from the east of our own country to the extent of sort of endangering our national security. So from that perspective, given your vast amount of experience and also the values-based diplomacy of the past, what do you feel, both analytically as well as from the mind and the heart, about this situation and how it might evolve for us going ahead?
We are supposed to be nowadays tying up our Act East policy with the neighborhood first policy. Now, it is really being said so, but I don't know how much actually effectively it is happening. Because our own problems with Bangladesh or Northeast and Myanmar, I think, are coming in the way. We are also in the Bay of Bengal with respect to BIMSTEC and other instruments that we have been following, not doing adequately, I think. So these are some of the limitations. In terms of trade, again, India and Southeast Asia trade, ASEAN, we have their agreement signed in 2010. We have been renewing it and so on. But I think the kind of interaction that India had hoped for with Southeast Asia, it is, I think, perhaps the main factor is the that is the feeling that China is now overtaking India in that. The Southeast Asians, again, they are now following a kind of a dual policy. On one hand, they are supporting the so-called Indo-Pacific concept. On the other hand, they have no hesitation in telling us that China is their main economic partner, and they do not want to do anything which will really jeopardize that relationship. So I think we are caught in this kind of, dilemma. And as long as we are not able to restore our relations in a way with China, also coming to terms with Southeast Asia with respect to economic and commercial policies, making it very clear to them that India is the first responder to their problems, be it in the Malacca Strait or in South China Sea. Some of these, I think, aspects have been left unsaid. They need to be clarified more clearly to these countries. I think till then, our relations with Southeast Asia will not fully restore. Obviously, they are now fishing in troubled waters. You know, this is an area which was primarily of our influence, which is slipping perhaps, I think, and that's why these countries are now taking the advantage.
And I think there's a question there.
Yes, thank you, sir, for a very insightful session and also the book we are looking forward to read. Before, I just want to thank you, sir. I was privileged to study in the Indian Council of World Affairs Library, where you provided a lot of support to all the students. Yes, sir. So my question is, you are the one who has seen the past phase of the Indian foreign policy, and today we are seeing completely a new vision of the foreign policy. And we are very critical of our old foreign policy. I do not know, but today it is happening that we all are becoming very critical of the foreign policy which was before 1990. And as a student of the foreign policy, I feel that phase was very important. I just want your view on that, how that phase has helped us to strengthen what today we are having the foreign policy. It has actually strengthened, but I want from your viewpoint how it has helped us in a very strong way, because today we are being very critical of our foreign policy before 1990. We are more critical, we are more analyzing, and we are more criticizing than supporting the earlier foreign policy which we had.
We seem to be now moving towards participating foreign policy. You know, given the strides in technology, today foreign policy is now conducted through internet, increasingly through AI, through Instagram or readouts. You know, these were not the norms of foreign policy till the millennium, I would say, till 20 years ago. Now, with these new changes, technological changes, the whole mode of diplomacy is undergoing transformation. Now that brings an element of, I would say, loss of responsibility on part of both the government as well as from people. You know, government have to explain perhaps foreign policy purpose more clearly, and people have to also understand some of the the intricacies of the running of the foreign policy. Maybe better debate on this is required, and how that can be achieved, that is something I think media has a big role in that. Academic community also has to do this, and the governments have to play their part too.
Now we'll have last question.
नमस्कार सर. देवरे सरांना माझा प्रश्न आहे. आत्तापर्यंत जितके वेळेला आपण सगळ्या एम्बसीची कामं बघितलेली आहेत आणि सगळ्या गोष्टी आजवरच्या इतिहासामध्ये बघितल्या आहे, तेव्हा दरवेळेला असं दिसून येतं की एम्बसी ही इंडियन लोकांच्यासाठी, तिथल्या इंडियन लोकांच्यासाठी भरपूर काम करत असते. आणि आताच्या या सोशल मीडियामुळे खूपदाच एम्बसी ही टार्गेटवरती असते. जसं युक्रेनच्या बाबतीत पण आपण बघितलं की बरेचदा स्टुडंट्स आणि त्या सगळ्यांनी एम्बसीला बऱ्यापैकी काही दोषारोपण पण केलेलं होतं. तर हे सगळी आताची जी सोशल मीडियाच्यामुळे झालेला बराच जो इफेक्ट आहे तो, आणि तुम्ही तर 5पेक्षा जास्ती खूप मेजर इव्हेंट्सच्या वेळेला तिथे होतात, तेव्हा इंडियन्सला तुम्हाला सपोर्ट करावं लागत होतं. तुमचा काय अनुभव होता सर? तुम्हाला या दोनमध्ये काय फरक जाणवला आणि तेव्हा असा कुठला अनुभव तुम्हाला आला का, आणि तो तुम्ही कसा हाताळलात?
भारतीय जे लोक समुदाय असतो दुसऱ्या बाहेरच्या देशामधला, त्याची जबाबदारी ही दूतावासावर असते. आणि हे दूतावासाचं कामच आहे, ते आम्ही सततच करत आलो होतो. आता उदाहरणार्थ त्यांनी मध्ये तिथल्या विद्यार्थ्यांच्या प्रश्नाबद्दल उल्लेख केला. युक्रेनने तेव्हा असं सांगितलं की आता हे जे पूर्वीचे ज्या फीज आहेत ते आम्ही वाढवणार आहोत, खूप आम्ही वेस्टर्न ह्याच्यावरती त्या फी आणणार आहोत, पूर्वीचे आम्हाला जे आहेत सवलती त्या मान्य नाही आहेत. अशा वेळेला हजारो विद्यार्थी एम्बसीकडे आले, पुष्कळ रडत आले, कारण त्यांची शिक्षणच तेव्हा बंद पडली असती. तेव्हा हा प्रश्न आम्ही मोठ्या जिद्दीने तिथल्या सरकारकडे उभा केला आणि त्यांच्याशी बरेच महिने यांच्यावर जेव्हा वाद चालला, शेवटी त्या सरकारने ठरवलं की ज्या ह्याच्यामध्ये टर्म्सवरती भारतीय विद्यार्थी इथे आलेले होते, म्हणजे त्यांना तेव्हा पहिल्यांदा जेव्हा आले तेव्हा फी मागत नव्हते त्यांच्याकडनं, असे बरेच विद्यार्थी होते. तर आम्ही त्यांना सांगितलं की जे विद्यार्थी त्या टर्म्सवरती आलेले आहेत त्यांना तुम्ही आता पुरत हे बाजूला करा आणि बाकी तुम्ही नवीन येतील त्यांना करा. हे त्यांनी मान्य केलं. उदाहरण असं दिलं मी तुम्हाला आता की भारतीय ह्याची ती जबाबदारी जी आहे आणि त्या जबाबदारीची जाणीव ही राजदूताला असावीच लागते. त्या जगा तिथल्या जनतेला असं वाटलं की दूतावास हे त्या जबाबदारीने काम करत नाही आहे. अशा वेळेला मग आता हल्लीच्या ह्याच्यामध्ये सोशल मीडिया आहे किंवा इन्स्टंट कम्युनिकेशन्स आहेत, इंटरनेट आहे, की त्यामुळे मग भारतामध्ये ते लगेच तक्रारी करतील, भारतामधनं त्याच्यावरती पुन्हा एम्बसीवरती येईल. या गोष्टी साहजिकच होणाऱ्या आहेत. पण त्यासाठी जर भारतीय दूतावास पूर्ण जबाबदारीने आणि पूर्ण संवेदनाशील होऊन जर का काम करत असेल तर अशा प्रकारची परिस्थिती होत नाही. आणि म्हणजे दूतावास आणि भारतीय समुदाय यांचे संबंध चांगले पण राहू शकतात.
Thank you, audience, for those questions. And as a token of appreciation, we will now felicitate our esteemed panelists. I would like to invite Dr. Shetkari on the stage for the felicitation. Also, Professor Vinay Hardikar, if you could also join us on stage. And would also like to invite Ishan Modi, Ambassador Devare's grandson, also to join us. Thank you so much, everyone. And to formally conclude our event, I would like to call upon Dinanath Kelkar, Director, Pune International Center, to propose the vote of thanks.
I stand here to propose the vote of thanks. First of all, thanks to the wonderful audience who have come in large numbers, especially after this program got rescheduled. I'd like to thank our President, Dr. Mashelkar. Dr. Mashelkar, thank you for specially reminding us of Ajitdada Pawar and his contribution to PIC. Also, an amazing summary from Dr. Mashelkar, calling out the front seat view that Ambassador Devare had in all these decades of his journey in foreign service. Thank you, sir, for doing the book launch at Pune. Thank you, Ambassador Devare, for authoring such an amazing book that is very relevant in current times. It was great to hear about the 5 epoch-making events that you narrated. Thank you, Mrs. Devare. Your contributions to this amazing journey is equally and very important. And I'd like to thank you for staying longer in Pune and being with us. I'd like to thank all our panelists, Ambassador Ramesh Mulye, Professor Shrikant Paranjpe, Shriram Pawar, and especially he reminded us of the movies and the web series. And I'm sure the Ambassador Devare is already talking to some filmmakers on Diplomat version 2 or version 3, whatever you may call it. And Professor Vinay Hardikar for being the odd man out and breaking the protocol. Pune International Center specifically loves this because we want to be very inclusive and have all the views to the people. And of course, he called out this as a must-read book for all the aspirants. Dr. Kelkar, thank you for being the chair for this session and providing guidance on the constructs of the 3rd book that you have recommended Ambassador Devare to write. I'd like to thank Rajalakshmi for being the MC for this event. Geeta Osmane, my deputy director, and other members of the team who have been part of the organizing committee. Finally, thanks to all the PIC members, and many of you would have received the PIC membership card as well as the desktop calendar. There were a lot of questions which people asked me what to do with the card. You will get an email on how to use the card, and we'll see how it can be used on an ongoing basis as well. But one important thing, in case you have not noticed, on the calendar there are QR codes, and one of the QR codes is about upcoming events. So anytime you are wanting to know what is happening in PIC, just click on that QR code and you will be able to see what's happening. And thank you again for being here in large numbers. Look forward to all of you being here for subsequent events as well. Thank you. Raja.
Thank you, sir, for the words of gratitude. Before closing, I would also like to invite you all for the further events at Pune International Center. On 13th of February, we would like to welcome you for an engaging conversation with Anshu Gupta, founder of Gunj. Then we have the Asia Economic Dialogue held from the 26th to 28th of February. And last, we have Palash, Music, Dialogues and Reflections, featuring the launch of T.M. Krishna's latest book and his musical performances. The registration links are on our website and social media handles. So I would request you all to please engage with our social media platforms, and looking forward to seeing you all at the future PIC events. Thank you.